The stars had always been quiet in this part of the galaxy. For 12,000 years, the Empire had ruled over hundreds of worlds without question. Their ships were massive and beautiful, built more for showing power than for actual fighting. They had not faced a real enemy in 2,000 years. Every species they met either surrendered immediately or was crushed within days. They believed they were the greatest civilization in existence, and no one had ever proven them wrong. Until they found humanity. The discovery came from a long-range scout ship exploring the outer rim of the galaxy. The scout captain sent back images of blue and green worlds, busy space stations, and sleek warships that moved with surprising speed. These creatures called themselves humans, and they had built an impressive little civilization in their small corner of space. The High Council looked at the reports and laughed. Another primitive species to add to their collection. Emperor As, ancient and proud, gave the order that had worked 1,000 times before. Send the herald. Deliver the ultimatum. Watch them tremble and submit. The message arrived at the Terran Federation headquarters on a bright Tuesday morning. It was formal and cold, filled with grand words about the glory of the Empire and the honor of becoming its subjects. The demands were simple: surrender all military vessels, accept colonial governors, and pay tribute to the Emperor. Humanity had 30 standard days to comply. Refusal would result in complete destruction. Admiral Jack read the message 3 times in his office aboard the TFS Ironclad. He was a tall man with gray at his temples and calm brown eyes that had seen many battles. His uniform was neat but worn, the kind of wear that comes from years of actual service rather than ceremony. Behind him, through the wide windows, he could see the curve of Earth glowing blue and white against the darkness. His executive officer commander stood beside his desk with her arms crossed. She was younger than sharp and quick, with short dark hair and a reputation for speaking her mind. She watched her admiral read the message and saw something change in his expression. It started as concern, shifted to confusion, and finally settled into something that looked almost like amusement. "Sir," she asked. Sat down and leaned back in his chair. "They want us to surrender our entire fleet and become a colony." "I read it," said. "They seem very confident." "They do," rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "What do we know about them?" Pulled up the intelligence files they had gathered over the past few months. The Empire was old and vast, spanning a quarter of the known galaxy. They had thousands of warships and billions of soldiers. Their technology was advanced but strangely outdated in some ways. Their weapons systems had not changed significantly in centuries. Their tactics were rigid and predictable, and most importantly, they had not fought a real war in over 2,000 years. "They rule through fear," explained. "Every species they've encountered has either surrendered or been so far behind technologically that the fight was over in days. They've never met anyone who could actually challenge them." Nodded slowly. "And they think we're just another primitive species." "It appears so, sir." The admiral stood and walked to the window. Earth hung in the void, beautiful and fragile and fierce. Humanity had crawled out of caves and fought its way to the stars. They had survived ice ages and plagues and wars that nearly ended everything. They had split the atom and walked on the moon and built colonies on distant worlds. They had done all of this not because the universe was kind, but because they refused to give up. "Call a meeting of the senior staff," said quietly. "All department heads 1 hour." The conference room aboard the Ironclad was functional and plain. No decorations, no symbols of rank beyond what was necessary. The officers who gathered there were the same, practical people who had earned their positions through skill and dedication. Chief Engineer Daniel Price was a heavy-set man with thick hands and oil stains that never quite washed out. He reported that the fleet was at 92% readiness, with minor repairs ongoing on a few vessels. Lieutenant Commander Amy, the tactical officer, was a small woman with sharp eyes who had memorized every piece of data they had on military capabilities. She presented her analysis with cold precision. Their ships are larger than ours, she said, but slower and less maneuverable. Their weapons are powerful, but their targeting systems are designed for stationary or slow-moving targets. Their command structure is extremely rigid. Every decision goes up the chain before action is taken. In a fast-moving battle, that's a serious weakness. How many ships are they sending? Someone asked. Initial reports suggest a fleet of 300 vessels, Amy replied. They call it the Ninth Armada. The room was quiet for a moment. 300 ships was a lot. The entire Terran fleet numbered less than 200 vessels spread across human space. Listen to every report and every opinion. Some officers were cautious. A few were afraid, though they hid it well. But most of them had the same look in their eyes that felt in his chest. It was not anger or fear. It was something harder to describe. It was the look of people who had been underestimated their entire lives and had learned to use that to their advantage. They expect us to be scared, said finally. They expect us to beg for mercy or run away. They have never met a species like us. He paused and looked around the table. We are going to politely decline their offer. Raised an eyebrow, politely. Very politely, confirmed with a slight smile. We'll inform them that the Terran Federation is not accepting applications for colonial status at this time. We appreciate their interest and wish them safe travels home. A few officers laughed, others grinned. The tension in the room shifted into something else, anticipation. The reply was sent within the hour. It was brief and formal and absolutely clear. Humanity would not surrender. Humanity would not submit. If the Empire wanted a fight, they were welcome to try. Across the vast distance of space, Fleet Master received the human response and read it with growing disbelief. No species had ever refused the ultimatum. Not once in 12,000 years. He reported to Emperor Os with confusion in his voice. The Emperor's response was immediate and cold. Destroy them, leave nothing. The Ninth Armada began its journey toward human space, 300 warships carrying the fury of an empire that had never known defeat. They expected an easy victory. They expected terrified humans fleeing before their might. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The Ninth Armada emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human territory like a storm rolling across an empty sky. 300 warships spread out in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming silver and gold in the light of distant stars. Each vessel was massive, some stretching over 2 kilometers long, covered in elegant curves and decorative patterns that spoke of an empire that valued beauty as much as power. Fleet Master stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and looked out at the stars that humanity called home. He expected to see defense platforms. He expected to see desperate evacuation ships fleeing toward the inner systems. He expected to see the chaos and fear that always came when the Empire arrived. Instead, he saw a single ship. It was small by standards, barely 400 meters long. Its hull was dark gray and angular, built for function rather than appearance. It had no decorations, no elegant curves, no display of wealth or status. It simply hung in space, alone, directly in the path of the Armada. "What is that?" demanded. His sensor officer studied the readings with confusion. "A human destroyer, Fleet Master, Terran Federation ship Valiant, it appears to be, waiting for us." Felt a flicker of annoyance. One ship against 300 was not bravery, it was insanity. The humans were even more primitive than he had thought. On the bridge of the TFS Valiant, Commander Ben Carter leaned back in his captain's chair and smiled. He was a lean man with messy brown hair and the relaxed confidence of someone who had been in tight spots before and always found his way out. His crew moved around him with practiced ease, checking systems, and monitoring the approaching fleet. "They look impressive," his helmsman commented. A young woman named Lisa Park who had a gift for making ships do things their designers never intended. "They do," Ben agreed. "Big and shiny, must take forever to polish all that." The communications officer looked up from her station. "Sir, they're hailing us." "Put it through." The flickered's face appeared. He was tall and thin, with pale blue skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on his elongated face. His expression was one of absolute contempt. "Human vessel," declared, "you are blocking the path of the Ninth Armada. You will power down your weapons, lower your shields, and prepare to be boarded. Resistance is not merely futile, it is meaningless. Your species has been given a chance to surrender peacefully. That chance has been rejected. Now you will face the consequences." Ben nodded thoughtfully, as if considering a reasonable offer. "I appreciate the information, Fleet Master, but I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. This area has been designated as a no-trespassing zone by the Terran Federation. We're going to have to ask you to turn your fleet around and head back the way you came." Stared at the screen in disbelief. Behind him, his bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances. No one had ever spoken to a fleet master this way. "You have one ship," said slowly, as if explaining something to a child. "I have 300. Ben shrugged. "Math was never my strong subject. Look, I'm just here to deliver a message. The Terran Federation doesn't want any trouble, but we're not going to roll over either. Go home, tell your emperor that we said no thank you, and everyone can get on with their lives." "You dare," his voice rose with fury. "Destroy that ship now." The communication cut off. On the Valiant's bridge, alarms began to sound as targeting systems from dozens of cruisers locked onto their position. "They seem upset," Lisa observed calmly. "They do," Ben agreed. "Let's give them something to really be upset about. All hands battle stations. Lisa, show them what this ship can do." The first weapons fired moments later, bright beams of energy that should have torn the small destroyer apart. But the Valiant was no longer where the beams were aimed. Lisa's hands flew across her console, and the ship danced sideways with acceleration that made the inertial dampeners strain. The beams cut through empty space. The gunners adjusted their aim and fired again. Again, the Valiant moved, spinning and diving in patterns that seemed impossible for a ship its size. Human vessels were built differently than ships. They were designed by a species that had spent centuries fighting itself, constantly developing new ways to outmaneuver and outgun their own creations. Speed and agility were not luxuries, they were necessities. "Forward squadron, pursue and destroy," ordered, his voice tight with anger. 30 cruisers broke formation and accelerated toward the fleeing human ship. They were faster than most vessels in the galaxy, but the Valiant stayed ahead of them, weaving through space like a fish through water. The human crew worked together with wordless efficiency, each person knowing exactly what the others needed without being told. Ben watched his tactical display as the pursuing ship spread out, trying to corner the Valiant against an asteroid field. He smiled. "Lisa, take us into the rocks." "With pleasure, sir." The Valiant plunged into the asteroid field at full speed. The cruisers followed, confident in their superior numbers, but the asteroids changed everything. The human ship slipped between spinning rocks with centimeters to spare, using the debris as cover and obstacles. The vessels, larger and less maneuverable, began to struggle. 2 of them clipped asteroids and fell behind with damaged hulls. 3 more nearly collided trying to match the Valiant's path. On the Eternal Dominion, watched the chase with growing unease. His targeting officers reported that they could not get a solid lock on the human ship. It moved too fast, changed direction too often, and seemed to predict where their weapons would fire before they fired them. Ben opened a channel to the pursuing ships. His face appeared on their screens, relaxed and grinning. "Hey, you guys are doing great. Really impressive effort. But I've got to run, dinner reservations, you know how it is. Same time next week." Before anyone could respond, the Valiant's engines flared with sudden intensity. The ship shot forward, accelerating faster than anything they had ever seen, and then vanished into hyperspace. The pursuing cruisers were left floating among the asteroids, damaged and confused. Stood on his bridge in silence for a long moment. His crew waited nervously, afraid to speak. Finally, the fleet master turned to his communications officer. "Send a message to the Emperor," he said quietly. "Tell him that the humans are not what we expected." "What should I say specifically, Fleet Master?" Thought about the grinning human commander, the impossible maneuvers, the complete lack of fear. He thought about 300 ships unable to catch one small destroyer. Tell him they are not afraid of us. Tell him they seem to be enjoying themselves. The message traveled across the galaxy to Emperor As, who read it with cold fury. He had never heard such a report. In 12,000 years, no one had ever enjoyed facing the Empire. He began to summon more ships. Far away, Commander Ben Carter brought the Valiant home to cheering crews and slaps on the back. But he knew the truth, and so did Admiral when they spoke later that night. This was only the beginning. The Empire would return with more ships and more weapons. The real fight was coming. And humanity would be ready. The Terran High Council met in a building that had stood for 300 years. It was not beautiful or grand. It was made of stone and steel, built to survive earthquakes and storms and anything else the world might throw at it. That was how humans built things, not for show, but for survival. 12 council members sat around a curved table, their faces lit by screens showing fleet movements and intelligence reports. Admiral Jack stood before them in his worn uniform, commander at his side. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of computer systems working in the background. Councilwoman Laura spoke first. She was an older woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, responsible for overseeing colonial development across human space. She had helped build cities on distant worlds and knew better than most what humanity had accomplished. "Admiral," she said, "the Ninth Armada is still in our territory. They have pulled back to regroup, but they have not left. We have received intelligence that the Emperor is sending reinforcements, thousands of ships." She paused. "Can we actually win this war?" Had expected this question. He had been asking it himself since the ultimatum arrived. But he had also spent the past week reviewing data and consulting with people who understood what humanity truly was. "I would like to introduce someone who can answer that better than I can," said Dr. Cole, head of the Office of Strategic Analysis. Cole walked to the front of the room. He was a thin man with glasses and the distracted look of someone who spent most of his time thinking about problems other people couldn't imagine. He carried a small and spoke with the calm voice of a scientist presenting facts. "Council members, Admiral has asked me to explain why we believe humanity has a significant chance of defeating the Empire, despite their superior numbers and resources." He tapped and images appeared on the main screen. "To understand this, we need to understand the difference between us and them." The screen showed a beautiful planet with gentle green continents and calm blue seas. "This is the Empire. Average temperature is 22 degrees with minimal seasonal variation. The atmosphere is stable. Natural disasters are rare. Predators were eliminated millions of years ago. They evolved on what we would call a paradise world." The image changed to show Earth, blue and white and beautiful but different. "This is In the past million years, Earth has experienced multiple ice ages that covered half the planet in frozen death. We have survived eruptions that blocked out the sun for years. We have endured plagues that killed half our population. We have faced predators that saw us as food." Let that sink in before continuing. The developed space travel over a period of 200,000 years. It was a slow, peaceful process of gradual discovery. They had no enemies, no competition, no pressure to innovate quickly. When they finally reached the stars, they found that most other species had evolved the same way, on gentle worlds with slow technological development. He pulled up new images, human history, soldiers in trenches, mushroom clouds, cities in ruins. Humanity developed space travel in less than a century after inventing powered flight. We went from wooden boats to nuclear reactors in the blink of an evolutionary eye. Why? Because we had no choice. We were constantly at war with our environment, with predators, and with each other. Councilman Bradley leaned forward. He was a cautious man who always worried about consequences. You're saying our history of violence is an advantage. I'm saying that our history of survival is an advantage, corrected. Every technology we have was developed under pressure. Our weapons were designed to kill the most dangerous thing we ever encountered, ourselves. Human beings are the apex predators of Earth. We hunted everything else to extinction or submission, and when we ran out of external threats, we fought each other. He showed technical readouts of weapons compared to human weapons. Energy weapons are powerful but slow to target. Their ships are designed to intimidate, not to fight. Their tactics assume the enemy will be scared and disorganized. They have never faced an opponent that could match them. The screen changed again to show human warships in combat exercises, moving in complex patterns. Our ships are fast because we designed them to dodge missiles fired by other humans. Our weapons are precise because we developed them to hit targets that were actively trying to kill us. Our tactics are flexible because we learned that rigid plans fail when fighting a smart enemy. Admiral stepped forward. What Dr. Cole is saying is that we have been training for this war our entire existence. We just didn't know what we were training for. Laura studied the data with thoughtful eyes. They have thousands of ships. We have less than 200. Numbers are not everything, replied. At the Battle of Thermopylae, 300 Spartans held off an army of hundreds of thousands. At the Battle of Britain, a few hundred pilots stopped an invasion force that should have crushed them. Throughout human history, smaller forces with better training, better equipment, and stronger will have defeated larger armies. He smiled slightly. They think this war will be easy. That is their greatest weakness. Bradley shook his head. This seems overly optimistic. You're assuming our technology is significantly better than theirs. I'm not assuming, said. We captured data from the ship's Commander Carter's crew damaged during the first encounter. Their targeting systems are 2 centuries behind ours. Their shield generators are inefficient. Their communication protocols are predictable. They never needed to improve because they never faced anyone who made them. The room fell silent as the council members processed this information. Outside the windows, the sun was setting over a city that had been rebuilt a dozen times after wars and disasters. Humanity had never had the luxury of peace. They had earned every step of their journey to the stars with blood and sacrifice. Admiral spoke again, his voice calm but firm. We are not asking you to believe that victory is certain. We are asking you to understand that defeat is not inevitable. They see us as primitives to be crushed. They have no idea what they're dealing with. Laura looked at her fellow council members, then back at, What do you need, Admiral? Authorization to move our fleets into defensive positions, permission to begin full military production, and support for a message to the Empire that makes our position absolutely clear. What message? Smiled slightly, the same quiet smile that had seen when he first read the ultimatum. That the Terran Federation will not run, that we will not hide, and that if they want our worlds, they will have to take them from our cold, dead hands. The vote was unanimous. Humanity would fight. Across the galaxy, Emperor Os finished assembling his reinforcement fleet. 10,000 ships prepared to jump to human space. He expected the war to last less than a month. He could not have been more wrong. Was humanity's oldest colony, a world of red sunsets and endless plains where 2 million people had built homes and raised families. It orbited a small red star just 4 light-years from Earth, close enough that children could look up at night and see the sun that had given birth to their species. For generations, had been a symbol of human expansion into the galaxy, proof that they could survive and thrive far from there. Now it was about to become a battlefield. Fleet Master brought the full might of the Ninth Armada to his doorstep. 300 warships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready. Behind them, the first wave of reinforcements was already on its way. Another 500 ships that would arrive within days had learned his lesson from the encounter with the Valiant. This time, there would be no games, no chases through asteroid fields, just overwhelming force. He broadcast his message to the planet below. People of your military cannot protect you. Your government has chosen war instead of peace. I give you one final chance to surrender. Open your shields and accept colonial status, or watch your world burn. You have 1 hour to decide. The response came not from the planet, but from the darkness beyond the system's edge. Fleet Master, this is Admiral Jack of the Terran Federation. Your ultimatum is rejected. If you want this system, you'll have to take it from us. Sensors detected the human fleet emerging from hyperspace. 97 ships, less than a third of his force. He felt a flicker of the old contempt returning. Did these humans never learn? Admiral stood on the bridge of the TFS ironclad, watching his tactical display fill with enemy contacts. Was at his side, calm and focused. Around them, the bridge crew worked with quiet efficiency. All ships report ready, Admiral said. Commander Torres and Captain Palmer have their squadrons in position. Nodded. On his display, he could see the carefully planned formations of his fleet. But he knew those formations would change the moment the battle began. That was the human way, plan for chaos, adapt and overcome. Open a channel to all ships, he ordered. The faces of his captains appeared on smaller screens around the bridge. Commander Torres of the TFS Defiant, her dark eyes sharp with anticipation. Captain Chris Palmer of the TFS Harbinger, checking his weapons one last time. Dozens of others, men and women who had trained their entire careers for a moment like this. You all know the plan, said. We break their formation, we stay mobile, we hit them where they don't expect. They're bigger than us, but we're faster and smarter. Make every shot count. Watch each other's backs. And remember, 2 million people down there are counting on us. He paused, looking at each face in turn. Give them hell. The channel closed, turned to his helmsman, take us in. The Terran fleet accelerated toward the Armada. On paper, it should have been a slaughter. 300 against 97. But what happened next would change galactic history. They expected a conventional battle. Their doctrine was simple. Form lines, exchange fire, crush the smaller force through attrition. They arranged their ships in precise rows, weapons pointed forward, ready to deliver concentrated volleys that no enemy could survive. The humans did not form lines. The Terran fleet scattered as it approached, breaking into dozens of small groups that spread across three-dimensional space like seeds in the wind. Watched his tactical display with confusion. What were they doing? This wasn't how battles were fought. Then the shooting started. Human ships attacked from every direction at once. They swept past vessels at impossible speeds, firing rounds that punched through shields designed to stop energy weapons. They launched missiles in swarms so thick that point defense systems couldn't track them all. They coordinated their attacks with split-second timing, multiple ships focusing fire on single targets before they could respond. Commander Torres led her squadron through the heart of the formation, weaving between massive warships that tried desperately to track her. Her gunners found weak points in enemy armor, joints where hull plates connected, cooling vents for reactor systems, sensor clusters that blinded ships when destroyed. Each target was chosen with precision, each shot designed to cause maximum damage. Defiant, you have 3 cruisers on your tail, a voice called out. Torres checked her display. 3 ships were pursuing her, trying to box her in. She grinned. Harbinger, are you seeing this? Captain Palmer's voice crackled back. I see them, bringing my squadron around. Moments later, The three cruisers found themselves caught between Tor's ships and Palmer's squadron. Rounds tore through their hulls from both sides. Two of them broke apart completely. The third drifted away, engines dead and hull venting atmosphere. Across the battlefield, similar scenes played out again and again. Human captains made decisions in seconds that would have taken commanders hours to approve. They adapted to changing conditions without waiting for orders. They took risks that seemed insane, but worked because they knew their ships better than anyone. Screamed orders from his bridge, but his fleet couldn't keep up. They were trained for wars against frightened species who surrendered at the first volley. They had never faced enemies who attacked into superior numbers, who seemed to dance with death rather than flee from it. The battle lasted 4 hours. When it was over, 112 ships were destroyed. 23 more were captured, their crews surrendering to human boarding parties. The rest fled into hyperspace, their formation shattered and their confidence broken. The Terran fleet lost 11 vessels. Every loss was mourned, but the victory was undeniable. Admiral stood on the bridge of the ironclad, looking at the wreckage floating through space. Debris from warships glittered in the light of the red sun. Rescue shuttles were already moving among the destruction, picking up survivors from both sides. Came to stand beside him. Her uniform was rumpled from hours of tension, but her eyes were bright. "We did it," she said quietly. "We did," agreed. "But this isn't over. This was just the 9th Armada. The Emperor has 10,000 more ships coming." "I know," looked at the destroyed fleet, the broken hulls and scattered wreckage. "But they know something now that they didn't know before." "What's that?" She turned to meet his eyes. "That we can beat them, that we're not primitive savages to be crushed, that we fight back." She smiled slightly. "They really had no idea, did they?" Shook his head. "No, they didn't." Below them, on the surface of 2 million people looked up at the sky and cheered. Their defenders had won. Their homes were safe. And across the galaxy, other species living under rule heard the news and began to hope. The humans had shown that the Empire could bleed. Now everyone was watching to see what would happen next. Emperor Os had ruled the Empire for 600 years. He had seen species rise and fall. He had crushed rebellions and expanded his domain across a quarter of the galaxy. In all that time, he had never felt fear. Fear was for lesser beings, for the weak species that trembled when his fleets arrived. But when the report from reached him, something cold settled in his chest. 112 ships destroyed, 23 captured. The survivors spoke of human vessels that moved like nothing they had ever seen, of weapons that tore through shields, of commanders who made decisions faster than thought. They spoke of humans who grinned while they fought, who seemed to enjoy the chaos of battle. The Emperor stood alone in his throne room, surrounded by the treasures of 1,000 conquered worlds, and for the first time in centuries, he did not feel like the master of the galaxy. He would not show this doubt to anyone. Instead, he summoned the Imperial Grand Fleet, 10,000 warships, the largest military force ever assembled in the history of the Empire. He would lead them himself. He would crush these humans personally, and the galaxy would remember that no one the Empire. But even as his fleet gathered, something else was happening, something the Emperor had not expected. The news of spread like fire through dry grass. On 100 worlds, species who had lived under rule for thousands of years heard the story of the humans who had said no, who had fought back, who had won. Secret envoys began arriving on Earth. Admiral met them in a quiet room far from the cameras and the public eye. They came from a dozen different species, tall and short, scaled and furred, beings that breathed different atmospheres and saw different colors. They had traveled at great risk, avoiding Imperial patrols and using back channels that they didn't know existed. They all asked the same question: "Will you help us?" Listen to their stories, tales of resources stripped from their worlds, of populations forced to serve in imperial factories, of cultures erased and languages forbidden. The Empire was not cruel in an obvious way. They rarely killed or tortured. They simply absorbed species into their system and slowly crushed everything that made them unique. "We have been waiting for someone to stand up to them," a small, gray-furred alien said. His name was, and he represented 3 colonized worlds on the Empire's eastern border. "We cannot fight alone. Our ships were taken long ago. Our weapons are gone, but if you showed us that it's possible to resist." The Terran High Council met again that evening. The room was tense. Councilman Bradley spoke first, his voice heavy with worry. "We are talking about declaring war not just against the force sent to conquer us, but against the entire Empire. We are talking about liberating worlds that have been under control for. This is beyond anything we have ever attempted." Councilwoman Laura looked at the report spread before her. Data on Imperial fleet movements, messages from subject species begging for help, projections of what would happen if humanity simply fortified its borders and waited. "If we hide behind our defenses," she said slowly, "we might survive for a few decades, maybe longer, but eventually they will come with enough force to overwhelm us. The Emperor cannot allow us to exist as an example to others. Our very survival threatens his rule." She stood and looked around the table at her fellow council members. "We didn't crawl out of caves and fight our way to the stars just to hide. We didn't survive everything our world threw at us just to surrender to the first empire that noticed us. Our ancestors faced extinction, and they kept going. Is this generation going to be the one that gives up?" The vote took less than 5 minutes. It was unanimous. Admiral took the combined Terran fleet to the edge of space. 97 ships had fought at, now 168 made the journey. Human production facilities were working at full capacity, building new vessels faster than anyone had thought possible. And with them came the first Allied ships, small craft from the subject species, outdated and poorly armed, but crewed by beings who had chosen hope over fear. The Imperial Grand Fleet waited for them. 10,000 warships arranged in formations that stretched across millions of kilometers of space. The Emperor himself watched from his flagship, the Eternal Throne, confident that the sheer weight of numbers would crush this rebellion before it could truly begin. Looked at the enemy fleet on his tactical display. The odds were absurd, impossible, but he had studied human history and he knew that impossible odds were nothing new. He opened a channel, not just to the enemy fleet but to the entire galaxy. His message would be heard on every world with a receiver, imperial and otherwise. "To the Empire and all who watch," he said, his voice calm and steady. "We came in peace. We asked only to be left alone. You chose war instead, and now you will learn what humanity has always known. The universe is harsh. Survival is earned. And we have been preparing for this fight since before we had a name for the stars." He paused. Across his fleet, on every ship and every deck, crews stopped what they were doing to listen. Engineers held their tools. Gunners rested their hands on their controls. Captains stood tall on their bridges. "We are not afraid of you," continued. "We have never been afraid. Your numbers do not scare us. Your empire does not impress us. We have faced worse than you and survived. We have clawed our way through ice ages and plagues and wars that should have ended us, and here we still are." On the Ironclad's bridge watched her admiral with quiet pride. Around her the crew was smiling. Not nervous smiles, not forced confidence. Real, genuine smiles of people who knew exactly what they were and what they could do. "You see us as primitive, as weak, as an easy conquest." His voice carried across the stars. "That is your mistake. We are the children of a world that tried to kill us. We are the descendants of survivors, and we are just getting started." He straightened in his chair, his eyes fixed on the enemy fleet. "Today, we fight for our homes. Tomorrow, we fight for everyone you have conquered. This is the beginning of the end of your empire. And when historians write about this moment, they will say that this was the day the galaxy learned a simple truth. He smiled, the same quiet, confident smile that his crew had learned to trust. Never challenge humanity. We have nothing to prove and everything to protect, and we absolutely refuse to lose. The channel closed. The fleet moved forward, and across 10,000 human ships, crews grinned at each other with the shared understanding of a species that had been underestimated for the last time. The battle for galactic freedom had begun, and humanity was going to win.